we've seen from the previous administration is that they did spend time listening to conversations between then Senator Jeff Sessions and the ambassador to Russia while he was in his U.S. Senate office. If that were to take place, which supposedly did take place, what other conversations did they listen in on?
Former campaign manager Corey Lewandowski supporting the president's claim that the Obama administration eavesdropped on Donald Trump and his team. And it's time now for our Sunday group. Dana Perino, co-host of The Five. Bob Woodward from The Washington Post. Peter Baker, who covers the White House for The New York Times. And Laura Ingraham, editor of LifeZette and a Fox News political analyst. Well, Peter, I'm sure you've been working your White House sources feverishly ever since President Trump's tweets started appearing on Saturday morning. Do they have any evidence to back up this contention that President Obama ordered the wiretapping of Trump and Trump Tower?
No, I don't think they do, and I think you basically elicited that from two very well-connected senators. There isn't an evidence chain at this point that would support such a sweeping assertion. Now, we obviously do have some reporting out there about an investigation of people around Trump, and it's certainly conceivable that some of the people around Trump have had their communications intercepted. Remember, the FBI intercepts a lot of Russians' communications, and if Russians were talking with Americans, they might have already tripped over that.
Right,
the idea that
Trump was saying something
himself,
different. He was
exactly.
saying that they wiretapped his phones in Trump Tower, and they didn't offer any evidence of that.
Right, and that the President of the United States at the time, Barack Obama, ordered it. There's no evidence that we know of to that effect.
Laura, first there's the question whether this is all true, whether or not the Obama administration, it would be very dramatic, ordered the tapping of the phones of Donald Trump in Trump Tower. But second, it seems to me, is there a political question, which is why does Donald Trump want to keep breathing life into this story about the whole Russia-Trump connection at the precise moment he's trying to unveil and push his agenda?
Well, perhaps one of the reasons is, and I don't know, but I'm just speculating, perhaps one of the reasons is because the reporting on the Russia supposed connection and collusion with the Trump campaign has been just feverishly overblown. The soundbite that you played, for instance, to Coons about Jeff Sessions, the entire soundbite where Al Franken is asking that question, which is really revealing, is he's like this rambling question about, well, CNN is reporting about some report that there might be compromising information. I don't even know if you've ever seen it, but obviously the import of the question was, did you speak with Russians in your capacity as a surrogate for the campaign? And was that about the campaign machinations? And that was obvious, the question. I actually don't think Jeff Sessions needed to recuse himself. I know that might be controversial, but if Jeff Sessions told the truth, and I believe he did, in that question, and the follow-up question, the written question submitted by Leahy, I don't think he had to recuse himself. I think Donald Trump's probably frustrated about that. I think a lot of pressure was put on Sessions to recuse himself. He was considering recusing himself earlier. But the idea that Russia threw the election for Donald Trump, and people in Michigan and Wisconsin and Ohio and Pennsylvania were all like, well,
but that's not really what they're saying. They're not saying that they threw the election. They're saying that there was collusion to interfere with the election. They're not saying that's why he got elected.
Carter Page, who was a one-time foreign policy informal advisor to Trump, and Paul Manafort, who is no longer with Trump, those guys were at conferences and saw some Russians, people connected with Russia in Europe. The thing is so tenuous, and I think you scratched the surface of it in your interview with Coons, and he had to say, well, we don't really have any evidence of collusion. This is a typical Washington feeding frenzy based on little to no evidence. Okay. And I think most people watching this are like, are we actually going to talk about the fact that we need to have jobs, the economy, and the border enforced? I think people are sick of this already.
But that's my point. Is Donald Trump who fed that this weekend with his tweets?
I think John Favreau's tweet, Chris, today or yesterday when he said, I'd be careful of people saying that the administration did not issue the FISA.
I wonder if he wasn't just trolling. But in any case, let me bring in Dana, because we asked you for questions for the panel, and we asked you your questions about this whole issue of collusion with the Russians. Janice Gibson, and this gets kind of to your point, Laura. Janice Gibson said this on Facebook. I honestly think the Dems are using this as a diversion. Of all the issues facing America, they focus on this. It's tiresome. But John Ferguson sees it a bit differently. The Republicans would not let Benghazi and email scandal go. Why should Dems let Russians go? hypocrisy on both sides, will it never end? And that's really the question. Is this just more of this constant cycle of political hardball?
Yes, however, I do think that Washington is able to do a couple things at once. So you have several investigations going on with this supposed collusion, and now I guess the president's team has said that they are going to ask congressional committees to also add in this question and this allegation that President Obama directly asked for a wiretap about President Trump. And I would imagine there's about 50% of the people in America today who believe that actually happened, even if there's no evidence of it. And the same is true from Democrats' perspective, think there's collusion when there, as the senator said, there is no evidence that they've seen about that so far. But at the same time, tomorrow, I believe you'll have a new executive order from President Trump on the immigration issue. You'll have an Obamacare plan that's sort of put out there by the House team. And they have lots of different things that they have to do, including a budget with members of the cabinet now having to go up to Congress and defend either a plus up for the military budget or the cuts that Donald Trump wants. And in the meantime, we haven't really had anything go bang in the world. But as we all know, that can happen at any moment.
Bob, and I promise, folks, we are going to talk about real issues and the agenda in the next segment. As someone who's seen a few Washington scandals, though, and I will defend myself on this question of talking about this so much, because it was Donald Trump who created this storm this weekend. What do you make of this? What do you make of the whole allegation of collusion? What do you make of the story that came out of the New York Times this week that the Obama administration spread the intelligence like breadcrumbs so that it would be out there and people would continue to talk about it and perhaps these leaks would happen? And then what do you make of Donald Trump's tweets this weekend?
Well, first of all, got to understand that as President Trump has this vast espionage establishment at his disposal, $50 billion a year plus. Even in the CIA, they call him the first customer. So he can get the information he wants. He's the only one in the government. The question is, did he just spontaneously, because he'd read something or heard something, put out this tweet, which is quite serious? We don't know. You're absolutely right. No evidence on that. On the Russian collusion, there's a lot of smoke, no evidence. The other thing is the mechanisms for investigating this are weak. Sessions, the Attorney General, has recused himself. Okay, how is the Justice Department, the FBI, going to really examine this? There's no independent counsel law. Special prosecutors don't work. Congress also is not very well equipped to do this. They've had some flops in recent investigations. So the quality of information, of evidence we're liable to get is going to be weak. I have to recall Watergate went on for 2 years and 2 months to get some sort of closure and clarity. I wonder how long this is going to take, months or years.
Oh, boy. But, you know, the only difference, Watergate, there was a break-in. We don't have any evidence
exactly.
of a break.
There was a clearly established crime, and in this case, you don't have it. But there is a lot of suggestion. People have just not come clean about what they did. Trump's the one, because he is the president, who could actually say, let's really examine this and put out some internal report.
There was, to be honest, there was a break-in. It was a break-in in the email accounts in the United States by Russian sources, according to the intelligence
the question as to whether there was collusion.
Who's responsible
with the Trump
about it is the next question. And at the break-in, we didn't know necessarily who was responsible about it at first, and that's where the investigation led. That's unlikely. You know, we don't think that that's necessarily where this is going to go at this point. And you're right. It's a lot of smoke without a lot of heat, a lot of heat without a lot of light. And the question is, you know, it's hard to imagine that a presidential candidate actually colluded in a very explicit way with a foreign power. But there are questions that have been raised.
I know you guys just want to talk about this, but I want to talk about issues. I want to talk about what somebody is going to affect somebody's life, Laura. And despite your best efforts, we're going to talk about that. We're going to take a break here.